Nature Center did exhibit them way back when I was there. This is an animal that we used to have in the Nature Center, but this is also an animal that we're getting a lot of becoming infamous. In fact, it's getting a lot of play on TV now. It's being routed as the bad guy, and I want to set the record straight about this animal. It's not a bad guy, it's just a different animal, okay? And it's an animal that's out of place, but it's an animal you need to know a little bit about. So we're going to kind of set the record straight, at least as far as I'm concerned, the way I think about things, and of course that's the correct way, right? So I don't want to leave you straight with any misinformation. So we're going to talk a little bit about number one bad guy of the Everglades, the Burmese python. So we brought the Burmese python here. Good thing on big guy. Okay. Now, I think he's been watching TV. Because on TV they claim that Burmese pythons, which are native to Asia and are often kept as pets by people, have invaded places like South Florida and the Everglades, and they claim that they're a danger to people, and that people better watch out. They might be something that's going to eat you and attack you. So I kind of like to challenge that thought, because I've worked with pythons for a number of years. Yes, they are big. This is not one that's as big as they can get. They can't get over 20 feet long, but this is kind of average here, which is maybe 12 feet long or something like that. But they can get very large, actually weigh a couple, 300 pounds or so. But Burmese pythons are actually kept as pets by people. A lot of times there's a lot of exotic animals out there that you have no idea about. There are people in Asheville who have lions, tigers, all kinds of things. You'd be surprised what your neighbor might have. But they might also have something like a Burmese python, you know. And most of your wildlife laws cover native wildlife. So you can't go out and just capture any wild animal and have it as a pet, but you could have a Burmese python. You could have a lion as a pet because they are not covered by those same laws because they come from somewhere else. So a Burmese python has always been just an interesting snake, you know, like other pythons in the world. And of course they get very big. You know, any animal gets big is always suspect about, is it big enough to harm it, eat a human being, they're going to strangle you to death, all those kinds of things. That's normally something that doesn't happen. You know, more people are killed by dogs and animals like that than they are by pythons. But you know, there's been a few documented cases where a python, a really large one, has eaten a really small person. But no, I just finished. You want to grab his tail? You want to help him? Here, grab his tail. I don't mind him. I'm just trying to constrict him to death. Well, you want this one? All right, in any case, but what's happened down in South Florida, if you pay attention to news, they claim that South Florida is being inundated by pythons. They're taking over the state. They're a danger to people, and they're afraid that pythons are going to spread throughout the United States. And there's actually been some laws that have been trying to put in place lately to ban certain species of large constricting snakes, including anacondas, pythons, and boa constrictors, and some animals like that, from the so-called pet trade, because they're afraid that pets that get loose, which does happen, pets that are released, which does happen, might actually take over and compete and become established throughout the United States. But the fact is, that's false science. And the fact is that these guys can survive in places like South Florida because it's subtropical areas there where the winters never get too cold around the Everglades. In those places, they do have a problem. But places like North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, any place, even North Florida, is probably safe from the so-called Burmese python invasion, which according to all the news media is spreading northward. We're all going to be having pythons over our backyard neighbors soon. So it's just kind of, you know, they want to have a good story. They want to kind of blow it up out of proportion. But South Florida does have a problem with exotic non-native animals that come from other countries because the climate there is so conducive for iguanas, for pythons, for boas, and things like that. But that's a South Florida problem. In fact, they've done some research up here where they've actually had pythons like this outdoors in places where they kept them through the winter, actually protected them from freezing cold, and they still end up dying because they cannot tolerate our cold winters. So I wish the media would get it right a little bit. I wish people would kind of think a little bit more level-headed. And as a volunteer with the Nature Center, if people come to you for some information about animals and nature-related things, you need to know that things like this are not a problem, will never be a problem here unless the temperature goes up about 30 degrees, and we never drop below about 50 degrees in the wintertime. That's not likely to happen. But Burmese pythons kept by responsible people, of course like me, and are not allowed to escape, you know, that sort of stuff, are not a threat. But anytime, you know, something goes wrong with a snake like this, it gives all of them a bad name. So there is a problem, like I say, in South Florida. The Burmese pythons and their other members of this large family of snakes, constricting snakes, are not bad characters. They're just misunderstood, and we need more responsible owners of snakes, turtles, lizards, other animals as well, so that we don't have these problems, you know. But being people, we often release things escape when they shouldn't, all kinds of things. So we have a lot of irresponsible ownership of animals. So